Rbtzn Kosman is a senior lecturer for Nefesh Yehudi, which is an organization that teaches Israeli university students Jewish thought and philosophy. Rbtzn Kosman is also the author of this groundbreaking new book that talks about gender equality and the male-female roles and relationships. This is one of the most hotly debated topics of modern Jewish life, and we are so excited to have Rbtzn Kosman with us. And my first question would be, how did you get involved in this topic? Why did you decide to write a book on this topic?
Yeah, so I can't say I really decided. It was more sort of like a process. I grew up in a home that was very intellectually provocative. We were very much encouraged to think things through and see for ourselves where there were issues that, didn't make sense or that, were hard to understand. And I also, I live in Israel, I live in Bnei Brak, and I have a little bit of a schizophrenic kind of existence because on the one hand, Bnei Brak is like, maybe the most ultra-Orthodox city in Israel. And at the same time, I work with Israeli university students. I teach in Nefesh Yehudi, so every night of the week I teach to another group of students. I meet a few hundred students a week, and I spend about 15 Shabbatot with them in a year.
Wow.
And I spend a tremendous amount of time with my students, so it's like a very big dichotomy, these two worlds. So, so the whole topic of gender is something my students were very interested in. It was very clear to them that there was a lack of equality here. But I have to say that it wasn't, so it was definitely like a combination of my childhood and my questioning kind of mind and, working with this particular audience. But I have to say that there were issues that bothered me as well, in the whole concept of equality.
Like what specific issues?
So, and it's very interesting because from lifestyle works very, very well, and I think that that's one of the biggest draws to Judaism is the family lifestyle. And I think people have good marriages, relatively speaking, and I think that, I think the family life is a very beautiful lifestyle. And I do think that, feminists often accuse people of giving lip service to the idea that a woman, the home and the family are so important. I think from people really believe that. In other words, and you would really have to be like an idiot not to realize that Judaism has survived all these years because of the kind of homes that women built. And so there really is a tremendous amount of respect that's given to women and the traditional woman's role. And in a certain way, the woman is put on a pedestal because she has that, she's keeping that internal fire going. At the same time, there are issues where it's clear that there isn't equality, Many examples I could give you. The fact that a man is allowed to marry more than one wife and a woman isn't. That whole concept is a little bit, is usually upsetting to the modern mind. The bracha that a man says every day, I really do think that women are very, very respected and in some ways respected more than men. There's a tremendous awareness of the importance of the woman's role, but at the same time I think that there is an intrinsic lack of equality, and I found that in general people ignore that. They're not comfortable with it, and the basic, it's sort of like swept under the carpet. We sort of ignore those commentaries that say the kind of things we're not comfortable with. And I mean, right there in Genesis, it says very clearly, one of the curses of Chava is, your desire will be for your husband and he'll rule over you. That's like starting right from that moment. You're talking about a hierarchy,
Yeah.
So it bothered me. When I sat down to write the book, I did not know what I know today.
Your book is titled Circle, Arrow, Spiral. And it's such an interesting title because it doesn't, to most of us, that doesn't mean anything to do with Judaism and feminism. Why did you choose the title of this book? What does it mean to you?
They're very good symbols because they really sort of give over what the idea of the book is in a short way. I think that Judaism, if I had to put it into one word, is about synthesis. It's about taking these two extremes, two poles, and bringing them together and producing something new with them. And that's the idea of the circle and the arrow. The circle, represents this holistic force, this harmonious force, and the arrow represents this driven, success-oriented, conquest kind of a source. And the spiral is the ability to take the two of them, each of them are incredibly significant, and put them together in a way so that I continue progressing upwards, but I do it in a holistic way. I take all of myself with me. The circle represents the feminine force, and the arrow represents the male force. But I mean, what's important for me to say is that we're really not talking in this book about men and women so much as the male and female force. And obviously we have to bring it into real life. But the idea of gender, my book is based on the idea is that I really feel that gender is the cornerstone of understanding all of Jewish philosophy. It's the primary metaphor that we have for our relationship with God. Jewish people are the woman, and God is the man. That's like in the book Song of Songs, and from a midrashic perspective, there's the concept that there's a constant struggle between these two forces. In every day of creation, there was another manifestation of the struggle between these two forces, and the male force won the battles, but they didn't win the war. The female force is always agitating under the surface, and that's what my book is trying to make us aware of that circle force, and and the ramifications being aware of it could have on our lives.
So you're not saying that men are one way and women are another way?
Totally not.
Totally not.
Totally
and
not.
It could be that a man could be a circle and a woman could be an arrow.
Not only that, but I mean, in the book itself, I talk about how every Jew has to develop both the arrow force and the circle force. I mean, the classic example is Shabbos and the 7 days of the week, 6 days of the week. The 6 days of the week are a male arrow force, are the days where we're supposed to acquire, accomplish, do, right? And the circle force is where we enter into this state of being. So definitely not all women are like, and it's not just a politically correct statement, it's actually borne out in the Medrash that we all have both aspects. And I think it's very dangerous to try and put men in one box and women in the other box. It doesn't work, and it's very limiting, for a human being to be
either one or the other.
Right. I mean, we're so used to, we're always talking about how women are good at communication, and some women are terrible at communication, and some men are very, very empathetic,
But do you think that the laws of the Torah and the structure of Judaism has very much pushed the woman into the female role and the man into the male role by saying that the woman is like the homemaker, and that's all about relationships, getting a relationship with your husband and with your children, and like building something through relationship, whereas the man is more the doer, and their role seems to be much more outside of the home. And how can we reconcile that with the very real struggle that women nowadays are facing? They don't define themselves anymore by the Jewish home. They are saying that's just one part of me.
So the truth of the matter is, I think that the structure that Torah offers us is much more fluid than people are aware of. And the areas where it's very clear what a woman can do and what a man can do are very small. From the Torah, there aren't even that many. Let's say a lot of the things that people talk about are more rabbinic in nature. The formal tefillah and the Torah reading and things like that. But the truth of the matter is that the parameters are there, but they allow for a tremendous amount of fluidity. And if you look at history, there were many great women that did all kinds of interesting things, and many, so first of all, I would say that, I would say that fluidity creates many more possibilities than one might think. And second of all, one of the main points that I want to make in the book is that femininity and masculinity has much less to do with what you do and much more to do with how you do it. And I don't think that there's any contradiction between practically any job and being feminine.
What do you mean?
I mean, you could be a scientist,
Yes.
So you could be a scientist from an arrow perspective. What's a scientist from an arrow perspective?
Very analytical.
Knowledge is like, power. So the more knowledge I have, the less power you have. And I'm going to hoard it and make sure that I don't share it unless I get a lot of money for it, etc. A scientist from a circle perspective, and obviously a man could do this just as well as a woman, is to say knowledge is one of the most pleasurable experiences that God's given us. And I have knowledge, I want to share it with you. One of the great thinkers of the last generation said that it's interesting that the minute that Eve ate from the tree, she shared it with her husband. He said he would not have shared it with her if she would. He wasn't being facetious. He was saying that the male force has this individuality, this is mine type,
yes.
And the female force is because it's more experiential and more relationship oriented. It's common experience. This is me. So she wasn't supposed to eat from the tree, but once she did, this is amazing. Come share it.
Yes.
So I think that we get really, really hung up on what a woman's doing, and the emphasis should really be on how one does it.
I found this, let's say, with the young professional women that I've been involved in, that I teach and that I know. They say to me, and I see it, that when they go into the business world, they have to fight for every promotion. They have to be aggressive and determined and willing to fight for their corner. I feel like in the workplace, it is very hard to be a circle and still be able to get a promotion, still be able to grow, still be able to get that kind of respect that somebody who has like more determination and aggression gets.
I mean, what I would say is never underestimate the power of your presence. In other words, if you, somebody who takes it at their life work to learn the art of a circle, then you'll take that with you wherever you go. And, I mean, I imagine that there are a lot of these kind of conflicts, but I think that the power of a person who brings to the world a circle force is, and I believe very much also in a trickle-down effect. The world is changing. The truth of the matter is, and this is a point that I want to stress, is that, I in the book, I explain how the circle represents the ideal force. And I show how the Garden of Eden, where we came from, was a feminine force, and the world to come is a feminine force. In the middle, we're in this very arrow-oriented world. So it's an ideal state, but it's very important for me to stress that the synthesis is extremely important. We don't want to negate the male force. The male force also needs to be there. It's very, very strong. So it's very powerful. We need it. We always need the synthesis. We need the two of them together. Postmodern society is very, very feminine. I mean, the influence that women have had on society is enormous.
What do you mean, like the men have become more feminine?
Yeah, well, I mean, because I have a philosophical background. So you look at modern philosophy is very, very masculine. There's one truth. And we have to try and establish what it is. Very hierarchical kind of perspective. And postmodern society is very circly. And it's scary also.
Yes.
Everything.
Everybody has their own truth.
Right. There's no definition, and we accept everybody. And of course, when you're completely a circle, so then it becomes this like amorphous river with there's nothing,
boundaries,
right? No boundaries. So we need them both. So it could be that it's difficult for women in day-to-day life and at work, but if you zoom out a little bit, you can see that women are having an incredible impact.
What kind of impact do you think feminism has had on Jewish women and Jewish men?
That's a difficult issue for women. That they're the minute that they don't identify themselves only with the house. So that's why I think it's very important to broaden the understanding of what femininity is. That it really has nothing to do with what you do, and it doesn't have to be a contradiction. And that's something I tell young women when I speak to them. And I've heard that very often from single women, that they feel like everybody's talking about that what is a Jewish woman? What's the job? The role of a Jewish woman is always the family. And again, we never underestimate the value of a family. There's no question that Judaism is a family-oriented religion, and the fact that it's so strong is definitely because it's been passed down through the family. And it's not, it doesn't happen in the temple or in the synagogue. It happens in the house. That's where the whole thing lives. But at the same time, there are many years in a woman's life where she's not completely focused on the family. Like childbearing years are a specific time. For me, they actually lasted for a long time, 20 years. But there's years before you have children. There's years after you have children. There's women who never get married. There's women who never have babies. And I want to maintain that when Hashem says, when the Torah says, it's not good for man to be alone, I will create a helpmate opposite him, I want to maintain that that's talking in a much more global sense. It's not good for this masculine frame of mind to be by itself. And the woman is always the other. The woman and the feminine force is always the other, standing outside and pulling the world to a place of health. I always think it's interesting how, people love this picture of an Israeli soldier up on a mountain wearing talis and tefillin.
Yes, it's like everybody's favorite photo.
And why is it? Because I think that if you analyze it, it's a picture of the spiral. You have this, the ultimate symbol of masculinity as a soldier. He has his gun, and he's, and then what's he doing? He's putting on talis and tefillin. He's turning himself into, he's showing that more feminine aspect of himself, that he's turning towards God in a receptive, relationship-oriented kind of mode. I do feel that feminism is a very, very powerful force, and the force is positive in the sense that it allows the female voice to get stronger. I think we're getting a little confused though here, because it's a very fine line between allowing the woman's voice to get louder and turning the woman's voice into a male voice. Like, for example, this whole discussion about, should women leaders have a particular title? I personally don't like the idea of a title, because I sort of feel that that I feel like in making the circle voice louder, what I would want to do is discuss the idea that hierarchy is just not so important. Status. What is a title? It's status. It sort of negates the fact that I just read this article about a study that they did in Harvard. I forgot what it was, like 80% of all the students that they interviewed, their main goals in life are to be rich and famous.
Right.
So why do we want to buy into that? Why wouldn't we want to have another voice where you can be powerful, you can be influential, you can be giving to the world, and you don't have a title? I feel like the fact that there's so much more accessible to women through the internet. If a woman wants to learn Torah, the world is open in front of her. She can learn whatever she wants. There's so many possibilities that are open. I personally feel that pushing for the same things that men have is a distortion.
Why you think it's a mistake? Because we as women are not going to get from this what we think we're going to get from it, or we're just trying to say, I'm just as good as you. Look, I can also. That's
what it sounds like to me. Because why dafka talis and tefillin? People who put on talis and tefillin don't necessarily do other mitzvahs. And I want you to know something. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with it. I had something interesting. I picked up. I was in a Hasidic shul in Bnei Brak for some sort of simcha, and there was like a little, one of these alonim that was lying around, and I picked it up, and it was the yard site of the Rbtzn, of this very, very, very Hasidus, and I'm looking at this thing, and one of the things that they write about this, she was apparently a very special woman, and they discovered after she died that she used to put on tzitzis. And I thought it was so interesting, because here they're writing that as a praise for her, but why? Because it was 100% clear why this woman was wearing tzitzis.
Yes, because she did it.
She wasn't interested in anybody knowing about it. They only had discovered it after her death. Because it was completely and totally about her relationship with Hashem,
yes.
And I think that when you and that's a circle force, that you're not interested in the status, you're interested in the relationship. It's all about dialogue, So I feel like the minute that you take it out to the public eye and you're fighting for it in a status kind of way, you'd miss the boat.
Can you give me an example of one of the gifts that feminism has brought to the world?
So I would say not feminism so much as femininity. In other words, when I say that as we get closer to the circle, the woman's voice gets louder. So what are one of the gifts that she gives the world? So I would say the idea of vulnerability.
Wow.
And I think that it's interesting. I actually read this recently. A particular feminist thinker, she talks about the fact that, Freud, his big innovation was the idea of the subconscious and all the things that are going on in the subconscious, and to try and bring them out to the surface, our emotions and our fears and our desires. And what she said is what's really interesting is that maybe the one who drove all those things down into the subconscious and took them away from our ability to deal with them was this male agenda. In other words, they're so they pushed it all under. Now we're spending the rest of our lives in psychoanalysis trying to get it all out, to try and deal with it again. But this idea of vulnerability, the idea that to recognize the fact that, change and growth is based on vulnerability. In order to be able to grow, you have to say things are not perfect the way they are.
Wow.
So the permission to be vulnerable, permission to understand our needs, and to say that we're looking for something that doesn't exist right now is an incredible gift, and I think it's one of the most important things we need to move forward. I really believe very, very much in the idea of knowledge and the ideas influencing life, where people will take this. I could go in a lot of different directions. I'm not a big, principle person, it should be this way, or we should be doing that, or let's do this. I sort of feel give the person the knowledge, the information, the ideas, and it can spread in many, many different directions. I feel what we've been talking about, to broaden the understanding of what it means to be a woman, what it means to be a man, and the dynamic between them. That's my legacy. To give people the opportunity to use that to help them make sense of their life and to get closer to Hashem.
Thank you so much for your time. I'd like to thank Miriam Kosman for coming all the way and for speaking to us. It has been such a privilege an honor to meet you, and thank you for explaining us so much of so much that we didn't understand before. And thank you for spending 10 years writing this book, because this book is really very significant, and it will have I think a very, very a very, very big impact across the world. Thank you.